Growing up, there were three horror icons that stood apart from everyone else. Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger in particular would take the world by storm, standing apart from his contemporaries. Now, most slashers in the early 80s were masked men who killed with bladed weapons. They didn't talk, either. Most relied on brutality over wit. But Freddy was different. Freddy was an overtly supernatural entity with a unique weapon, his iconic bladed gloves, a unique twist, the fact that he killed you in your dreams, and a loud personality.
Please, God.
This is God.
Chucky, Ghostface, and even Art the Clown owe Freddy Krueger a debt of gratitude for combining gallows humor with gory, brutal kills. But something happened along the way. Probably after Freddy vs. Jason, I imagine. Freddy sort of fizzled out on his own in terms of popularity. Now, can we blame all this on Jason Voorhees? Well, probably not. He didn't seem to continue in the popular zeitgeist the way his contemporaries did. And it's not just that the last film he made, the remake, was terrible. Because a lot of characters have bounced back from disappointing follow-ups. Just look at Michael Myers, or even Pinhead, a character who appeared in some really terrible sequels. I think Hellraiser after Part 2 was nothing but bad sequels until you got to the remake. Hellraiser Revelations is vastly worse than any Nightmare film, even the remake. But why did Freddy disappear so completely from the public view? What we're doing today is going through the Freddy Krueger franchise, movie by movie, to see how Freddy has struggled to remain relevant, as well as how I feel there is potential for Freddy to return right now, if the right people act. And no, I'm not going to wear this mask the entire time. This is getting a little ridiculous. What are we going to do? Wear eye patch the whole time of this script? No way. Now, to date, they are 9 Nightmare on Elm Street films. And I think we can break these down into 3 eras to get a real sense of where the series fell off and why he's had such a hard time coming back. And yes, by the way, spoilers for the entire Nightmare on Elm Street series. But I mean, come on, you've had 40 years to watch these movies. I think we can deal with some spoilers in this case. So, to divide the series up, we've got the Prime Era, the Decay Era, and the Revival Era. Now, the Prime Era of Freddy Krueger are his first 3 films. It's here we first learn who Freddy is, how he came to be, what he's all about, as well as get a sense of the tone of his character and films. Now, undeniably, the first and third are the most popular even to this day. They essentially tell a singular connected story centered on the character of Nancy Thompson, a teenager in Springwood. Now, in the first film, Nancy is a teenager whose friends and her are being stalked by the spirit of Fred Krueger, a child murderer who the parents of Springfield murdered when they couldn't get him landed in prison for his crimes.
Took gasoline, then lit the whole thing up and watched it burn. He's dead, honey, because Mommy killed him.
Now, in the third film, Nancy has grown from experience with Freddy and becomes a doctor who works to protect kids and is forced to save the last of the quote-unquote Elm Street children from Freddy, the children of the parents who slew Freddy years ago.
Your parents, my parents, they burned him alive, and now we're paying for their sins.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is also here. Now, at first, it was deemed as a pretty weak entry. It completely breaks all the rules and almost replaced actor Robert Englund as Freddy. Now, we'll get to how important Englund is to the franchise's success in a bit when we get to the remake. But for right now, 2 was where we realized Englund is irreplaceable. 2 is also famous today for its heavy gay themes.
He's inside me, and he wants to take me again. What do I have to do to make you understand me?
Which was really remarkable for coming out during the height of the AIDS epidemic. So that I think has earned it a cult classic status among some horror fans. It also has some vastly underrated moments as a Nightmare on Elm Street film. For example, Freddy having powers in the real world, yeah, it's illogical and breaks all the rules, but it also has some really cool bits, like where Freddy claws his way out of Jesse's body to kill Ron. Or that scene at the pool where he goes, "You are all my children now." But 3 feels different. It focuses on a group of different teens with different gimmicks in a mental hospital. We're not on a street, we're not near the suburbs, we're in a facility, enclosed, encapsulated, and no one believes the kids when they tell their stories. The adults in these films always gaslight the kids into not believing what they see, but here it takes a new level. Not only are the parents not believing, they think their children are actively a danger to themselves because of the stories they tell. In a lot of ways, 3 is a parallel to the first movie, where in that first film, Nancy, no one believed her. Not her parents, none of the other adults, nothing. And she had to be self-reliant to stop Freddy, right down to setting booby traps all on her own to stop him. But in 3, now Nancy is the only adult in the room who believes these kids, and sets right the wrongs done to her. You see something you don't see in a lot of slashers thanks to Nancy's presence. An adult working with the teens, and the teens working together to stop a common threat. You see supportive adults helping kids and kids helping each other. It's a community against a singular monster. And after 3 films where individuals had to fight Freddy off, there's something very remarkable about this. We also learn that Freddy gets more powerful with each kill. So every time he returns, he's stronger and stronger because he's absorbed the souls of his victims. And this helps increase the fear of Freddy. He's not just killing you, he's also tormenting your soul forever after. And it makes the kills feel more heavy. Every loss, you now know they're being tormented by Freddy. And sure, you learn a little bit about Freddy Krueger's backstory, like how his mother was a nun who was assaulted by 100 maniacs when she was accidentally locked in an asylum.
The bastard son of 100 maniacs.
But more important than that, I think, is that 3 is the most imaginative film to date, with all these kind of funny but kind of disturbing kills that plays upon each kid's unique features. And while the kids protect one another, Freddy wisely tries to separate them. You see the intelligence behind Freddy's approach to these kids. He's not simply someone you stand up to once and you can stop. He's still a tough battle even when you're working together. So the tension is never abated. With a lot of slashers where teens do work together, sometimes it feels like once the kids team up, the guy goes down quick. But with Nightmare on Elm Street 3, that's not really the case. It's a multifaceted battle against Freddy, both in the real world to bury his bones, and in the dream world to save each other from Freddy's wrath. In these first 3 films, there are a few things established. That the adults are useless. The adults are part of the problem just as much as Freddy Krueger is. In every film, with the exception of Nancy and the one doctor, the adults are either, at best, not able to help, or B, actually help Freddy inadvertently through their ignorance of the situation. And I think that helps it feel more impactful, that kids feel completely isolated and are forced to be self-reliant unless you've gone through this torment before. Now, of course, there are some problems, though. For every good villain, there's a great hero who opposes them. Michael Myers needs his Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis. Ghostface needs Sidney Prescott. And Freddy needs Nancy. So when Nancy is killed in the climax of 3, we're left with the legacy characters. And that's where things get tricky. You see, Michael and Ghostface might need Laurie and Sidney, but they have other enemies, other heroes who pick up the torch and pick up the legacy of those before them. Jamie Lloyd in Halloween's Part 4, 5, and 6 is a worthy successor for Laurie, in part because she's, well, Laurie's child facing off against pure evil. In Scream, you got Sidney, Gale, and Dewey, a trinity of characters who face Ghostface time and time again. But in Scream 5, you're introduced to the Carpenter sisters, the new protagonists, and Sam Carpenter is the daughter of the first Ghostface, and has a sort of psychological connection to the legacy of Ghostface. And much like how Laurie appears in later Halloween films, Sam Carpenter is affected by her experiences. Her journey into Scream 6 is a really compelling narrative, and I look forward to seeing how her story concludes in Scream 7. Oh wait, yeah, that's right. She's not in Scream 7. That's right. I almost forgot about that little controversy. Child's Play has so many different interesting reoccurring protagonists that you need a wiki to keep track of all of them. But that's not the case with Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's why the Rising era, this first chunk, ends with the death of Nancy. Because the series has a real problem. After Nancy, Freddy's rivals kind of underwhelm. In Nightmare on Elm Street 3, we're introduced to Kristen, who's played by future Academy Award winner Patricia Arquette. And honestly, I actually really think she's not bad. She's a good character and does the role pretty well considering everything. She's a teenage girl with this incredible power, the ability to bring people into her dreams. It's really neat and plays on that whole idea of community coming together to stop a common threat. And with Nancy as her mentor, you see her build in confidence and become a worthy challenger to Freddy. So inevitably, when Freddy returns in the next film, you assume she's going to be the main character, and she's going to learn from her experiences to fight Freddy, much like how Nancy drew from her experiences to help the remaining Elm Street kids. And that's where you're wrong, because now we're going to enter the decay era. The decay era of Nightmare on Elm Street consists of films 4, 5, and 6, The Dream Master, The Dream Child, and Freddy's Dead. And this is where things get rough. See, Nightmare on Elm Street 4 is directed by Renny Harlin, a guy most famous for making sequels that are just never quite as good as the prior films. He also did Deep Blue Sea, which has a good Samuel L. Jackson death, but I digress. Rennie's imagination is on full display in Part 4, and we have some of the most imaginative kills in the series, with these incredible dreamscapes and hallucinatory visuals. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, is not a bad Nightmare movie. It was, for a time, the most successful film in the franchise financially. However, within 4, we see a lot of the problems that would plague the franchise to come. Now, the first mistake, recasting Kristen with Tuesday Night. Gone is Patricia Arquette, in is Tuesday Night, an actress whose name I've never seen elsewhere. I know it's a complicated reason why Arquette couldn't be there, but it's a clear downgrade. To make matters worse, they kill off the remaining Elm Street kids within the first half hour of The Dream Master. All of them. Everyone who survived, they're dead a half hour in. It's like Alien 3, except we see how they die this time. And while I think it's interesting that Freddy does hunt them all down in quick succession and kill them, it makes Freddy a bigger threat, of course. It also feels lackluster, because Freddy just finishes his mission before the first half of the film is done. The goal Krueger has been pursuing across the first 3 films, it's done. And the film keeps going, and the protagonist had no involvement in stopping Freddy, because Kristen is not the protagonist of The Dream Master. Now, I do want to point out, I like how Freddy does accomplish his goal, but still wants to keep killing kids, because he's an evil bastard who wants to kill kids. So it wouldn't just stop with his revenge, he's going to keep going. And I like how the film establishes his motivation to keep being an evil monster, despite finishing his mission, because he wants more. And through Alice, the titular Dream Master, he's able to reach new children that he couldn't reach before, to surpass the limitations of his power. You see, when Kristen dies, she gives her powers to a teenage girl named Alice, a shy, quiet girl. While you would think Alice now has the power to bring people into her dreams, in actuality, Alice now has the power to absorb the skills and abilities of anyone Freddy kills. Now, while Freddy absorbs his victims, Alice absorbs their power, their strength, so that Alice has a power that can counterbalance the power Freddy is getting. And on one hand, that's neat. It's interesting. You have a unique protagonist with a unique power to fight Freddy. But on the other hand, it really hampers the narrative to come. See, I love the idea that we see the potential for Freddy's new rival, someone equally powerful to him. That's cool. But I hate that in order to get Alice to that power level, her friends need to die. From a narrative standpoint, it reduces the tension. Kids working together to stop a common threat is one thing, because we want to see all the kids survive. Any loss impacts that goal, staggers that goal. And while it's really cool to see Alice turn Freddy's powers against him, seriously, 4 has the best Freddy death in the whole series, where the souls contained in Freddy burst out and try to tear him apart from the inside. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, sure, but it's cool to look at. Alice is just too powerful, and it breaks the logic of the series in a way that is more immersion-breaking than Freddy having real-life powers in Part 2. At least in Part 2, when they broke the rules, it made Freddy more threatening. But in 4, Alice's powers make Freddy less threatening. And to add insult to injury, this is the movie where Freddy went from being this darkly funny character from Part 3 into a clown. In the previous film, especially 3, Freddy made jokes to bully his victims as he brought them closer to death. But here he gives post-mortem one-liners after the characters died. You know, for who? himself, the audience. It doesn't make sense organically for Freddy to mock the kids with their death when they're already dead. And again, I want to reiterate, I actually do like part 4. It's one of those films that's the easiest to rewatch at like 11 p.m. on a Halloween night or something. But everything 4 did wrong gets amped up to absurd degrees in 5 and 6. In part 4, if the characters died, it was okay because it meant we're going to get Alice stronger, there's some benefit, and while some of the kills are really cool, at least we know it's in service of a greater narrative. In part 5, though, we want to see Freddy kill the other characters because they're annoying.
Open the champagne, let's have a party!
I think The Dream Child, part 5, is my least favorite Nightmare film, with the remake put aside. Maybe even worse than the remake, I think. It's a boring, bland movie that, again, just makes no sense. So Freddy has lost his soul, so he's now at his weakest state now, and he tries to revive himself by possessing Alice's unborn child. And the kills, aside from the cyberpunk motorcycle kill, are pretty lame. And the characters are all really one note. None of them feel very distinct. There's that one kill where there's a character, Greta, who has like an eating disorder. And so Freddy kills her by force feeding her own organs. I don't know if this is maybe because I've watched the movie Taxidermia, but there's so many more creative ways you could do that idea in a movie to kill someone like that. I don't know. I feel there's a lot of ways they could have done that in really clever, disturbing ways. This feels very censored, and a lot of that has to do with the MPAA cracking down on the film. Only recently, with the recent Blu-ray edition, has the uncut version of Dream Child come out, but that's all just superficial trimmings, essentially. It still doesn't change none of the kills are really all that impactful. Especially the comic book kill, where we get introduced to Super Freddy. One of the lamest scenes I've seen in a very long time. The film is ultimately very tame, and while there's some imaginative set pieces, especially the end with the ladders and stairwells and all that, there's really nothing in this film that stands out in hindsight, which makes it marginally better than Freddy's Dead, the 6th and supposedly final film in the franchise at that point. Because you see, Freddy Krueger becomes a complete clown here, killing people with a Nintendo Power Glove.
Now I'm playing with power!
Featuring cameos from Roseanne Barr, Alice Cooper, and Johnny Depp, returning to the franchise after his acting debut in the first Nightmare film. But the issue here with Freddy's Dead is it feels the least like a Nightmare on Elm Street film. In this film, Freddy's killed all the children in Springwood. I guess Alice left town and Freddy got to work when she left. Or maybe Alice died. It's never clear because the film doesn't really care what happened to Alice. The continuity so far has been very much structured. We've always seen a logical through line from film to film to film, even part 2. So with that big jump in events, it feels like we're missing a film between Dream Child and Freddy's Dead. And it's jarring. It feels like we're kind of jumping into a narrative after missing a bunch of chapters of it. Because now Springwood went from this a normal suburb with a lot of dead kids to a complete desolate apocalyptic wasteland out of Fallout. And what's really weird is that with each Alice film, Freddy's left in a weaker state than before. First he loses all the souls he had inside of him, then he's left weaker than a fetus in the next film. So it feels like we're bringing Freddy down further and further, but now he killed all the kids? It seems like we missed a lot, I feel like. Anyway, like in part 4 though, he wants to keep killing even though he's run out of kids. So he has to hijack the dreams of his daughter, the daughter who no one has mentioned until this point, in order to find a new town to haunt. Because after all, as he puts it,
every town has an Elm Street.
I don't hate this concept in theory, but something so apocalyptic and terrifying should feel scarier. Instead, Springwood is a cartoon world, with Roseanne Barr.
It's been so long since we've had children in the house. So long.
Actually, Roseanne Barr being in this might make this slightly more scary. I will be fair about that.
I want my children back! You know they bring him!
But the problem is, now this series has nothing anchoring it. There's no protagonist who's been reoccurring or set up that we can follow, who has survived Freddy before, now has experience to train a new generation. There's no Elm Street. There's actually very few dream sequences here too. And there aren't even a ton of kills, though the hearing aid kill is a highlight. I think it's one of the best kills in the series, even if the movie itself is pretty lame. And Freddy's daughter is easily the least interesting element of the whole film, in part because it's a twist, she's even Freddy's daughter. Also, the revelation that the dream demons brought Freddy back feels I don't know, it feels like it takes the enigma out of Freddy. Knowing some sperm fish from hell brought Freddy back is lame. It's not his spite or evil, it's just sperm fish that he worships, I guess. And I don't like it. It's stupid. It's dumb. Also, how Freddy gets dead in Freddy's Dead is really fucking stupid. In the first film, they dragged Freddy out of the dream world into the real world, and they managed to kill him. They lit him on fire. They burned him. In the third film, they buried him in holy water. In the fourth film, they tear his soul apart. But in here, they take him out of the dream world, and they stick a pipe bomb in his chest. It's a pipe bomb. That's at the height of Freddy's power, a pipe bomb beats him.
Kids.
Even considering what we'd see in Freddy vs. Jason, where Freddy takes more damage than a pipe bomb to the chest and still survives, it feels even lamer in hindsight. But they didn't care. They just wanted to end this franchise. They wanted to put like some comedy in here. They weren't taking it too seriously. And they're like, how can we, don't forget. They're the same franchise in part 4 that brought Freddy Krueger back when a dog named Jason peed on his grave.
Jason?
So, hell, all bets are off. Why are we taking this franchise all so seriously anyway? It's all dreams anyway. It's all fun. It's an MTV music video. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. And by part 6, it's clear the filmmakers aren't taking it too seriously either. And while this ended the franchise for a while, it was time for a revival. The revival era of Nightmare on Elm Street consists of the next 3 films, all of which grapple with Nightmare on Elm Street's legacy, rather than directly revive the series. After all, at this point, sales were very low, the fad was fading, and people were ready for a more serious, grounded horror film, like, say, Silence of the Lambs, or Candyman. However, what's interesting is with each revival of Freddy, less interest was put into it by the franchise fans, and in some cases, general audiences. New Nightmare is fascinating because it's not really a sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street. It's Wes Craven's movie reflecting on the franchise he created. It's a film about people who make horror films, grappling with the public legacy, and the responsibility of making something terrifying. The plot itself is about the actors of the first film being haunted by not Freddy, but a demon that embodies cultural fears, taking the form of Freddy.
Saying Freddy is this ancient thing.
Current version. And for 10 years, he's been held captive pretty much as Freddy in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. But now that the films have ended, genie's out of the bottle. Craven
is playing with the idea that we have cultural stories that capture the fears in our society. Craven's always been very aware of the implications of his narratives, but here he's at peak self-reflection. With Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, Craven was very consciously discussing American problems in his films. And in, of course, the original Nightmare on Elm Street film, he grapples with the idea that parents create problems that children have to suffer. Now, the specifics of the fear is not as important to New Nightmare. It's rather that we capture cultural fears with horror films and have to grapple with what we do with those fears when the horror ends. How do we live with these cultural anxieties when they're no longer codified and restricted to a singular story? It's Craven arguing that the political nature of horror, once it's over, it can leave us having uncomfortable questions we take home with us. Or maybe just horror films literally capture demons. Who knows? The big issue I have with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, however, is that the film's not scary. Yeah, Freddy in this movie is a darker character. He's more sadistic and evil and doesn't tell any jokes.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
But he's also not Freddy. He's a demon who looks like Freddy. Instead of the boiler room Freddy takes his victims to in all the other films, he takes us to a Hansel and Gretel-inspired witch's hut. A hellscape. The film also focuses on Heather Langenkamp, which I think is interesting. I think Craven is acutely aware that Nancy is the core of what made the original films work, alongside Freddy.
Dramatically speaking, it makes perfect sense. You played Nancy after all, and you were the first to humiliate him, defeat him.
That was Nancy, Wes. It's not me.
Yeah, but it was you that gave Nancy her strength.
But also, it's a missed opportunity that we don't get to see Robert Englund cross paths with Freddy. I mean, we're told, basically, that he's met Freddy, that he's seen this new version of Freddy, but how cool would it be to have Englund also grapple with the legacy he's created, with the monster he's made? Want something that is clownish, but also tackling very grave fears and anxieties. I think it would have been really cool to see more scenes with England being haunted privately by Freddy, but I also don't know how that would have changed the narrative. It would have told a different film entirely. Of course, this film is a rough draft of what would become Scream, which is undoubtedly the better movie, but still, it's a great movie worth watching. It also failed completely financially. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's Freddy vs. Jason, a batshit crazy movie that mashes action figures together for 90 minutes. Now, this film is following up a plot thread set up in Jason Goes to Hell, where Freddy, at the end of the movie, drags Jason's mask into hell. And fans have been begging for years what the film would be like. And for years, there were so many scripts written. Half of them completely batshit insane. Some dealing with cults. One had Pinhead break up the fight. One ended up with them fighting in hell. And what we ultimately got is probably the least over-the-top script, but also one of the more effective ones. I love Freddy vs. Jason. It is 90 minutes of insanity and fun.
Ready for your thoughts, Chief. Oh, scared?
I know a lot of Friday the 13th fans don't love this film because it is more of a nightmare film than a Jason film. After all, it's Freddy once again trying to return to the world of the living, using Jason's bloodlust to inspire fear of him in the hearts of Springwood.
Oh, that's right. Everyone forgot. That's why I needed Jason to kill for me to get them to remember. But now he just won't stop.
And I like that. I also like how the town is taking precautions to restrict Freddy, to hold him from ever returning, almost becoming a third antagonist to the story. And while I kind of wish that Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash panned out, it didn't because Bruce Campbell, who plays Ash from Evil Dead, wanted to be the guy who killed Freddy and Jason, and New Line was like, we can't do that. I wish it panned out. I wish we saw that. We got a good couple comics out of it, but I really do wish we'd have seen that. I do kind of feel like there's a missed opportunity. Freddy vs. Jason was this huge success, and we never got a sequel to it. It could have really revived both Friday and Nightmare as new franchises in the 2000s, the same way Texas Chainsaw Massacre the remake brought back Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But we just didn't get that. And I gotta say, Freddy vs. Jason, though it is a dumb movie, does have some interesting themes at play. Springwood, for example, has evolved. The town treats Freddy like a pandemic, isolating anyone who sees him in their dreams and putting them on drugs.
Hypnosil. What does this shit do, anyway? How come we all have to take it? Keeps you nice and docile while I kick your little ass.
And this is actually something interesting that Nancy recommended doing in the third film, putting the Elm Street kids on Hypnosil to keep them from dreaming so they wouldn't encounter Freddy.
You want me to prescribe an experimental psychoactive drug to a bunch of suicidal teenagers?
Now, they conclude in the film that Freddy needs fear to get powerful. So what do? They deny him that fear. They starve him of his ability to return. And I think that's a cool idea, that the town is fighting against Freddy in a way that actually hurts the kids of Elm Street. Because again, up until this point, the parents in Springwood are useless. This is in keeping with Wes Craven's original idea, that the sins of the father are repaid upon the son. And that the parents, in keeping with this worldview, would completely ignore a problem they created, either intentionally or incidentally, even as it destroys their families. And of course, I think this reaches a peak in Part 4, The Dream Master, where Kristen's mother gives her daughter sleeping pills to get her to rest, inadvertently handing her over to Freddy with no opportunity of escape.
Kristen, we went over this in therapy! No, Mother. You just murdered me. Take that to your goddamn therapy.
But in Freddy vs. Jason, it's the opposite problem. The parents have essentially created a police state to stop Freddy for good, and will actively put their children into dreamless comas to stop him. So in effect, Springwood's adults are a tertiary villain alongside Freddy and Jason. But then nothing really comes of it at the end of the day. All the adults are right, and they were good for stopping Freddy. Ends justify the means, I guess. And I kind of wish the ending didn't undercut the horror of a town taking kids off the street and imprisoning them for no crime but the circumstances of what happened to them, for surviving horror, and then disappearing them, unpersoning them from society. I feel that's kind of a crazy, terrifying idea, and they don't do enough with it, I think. This leads, sadly, to the most recent attempt to revive Nightmare on Elm Street, the Platinum Dunes remake, which I think is what put the franchise on ice ever since. This movie tried to be like the original with a darker tone. And look, I love how the original series becomes this MTV-esque nightmare-scape, but like, I don't think that would have worked in the 2000s, where we had a very different aesthetic after years of the War on Terror, years of Saw and Hostel films, as well as J-horror movies. We had entered an extreme era of hyper-realism. The new French extreme was still going strong at this time. So the series needed to go darker after years of levity. And this is also the first movie without Robert Englund as Freddy. I get it, Englund is getting on in years. He's not going to play Freddy right now. Though he's mentioned he would be down for playing him in animation. In live action, the time's passed for him to come back, outside of Goldberg's cameos.
Adam said he wished I wasn't his mother.
Oh, jeez, that's an awful thing to say. I'ma kill him!
No.
But what Englund brought to Freddy is unique. A mix of malice, hatred, and cruel glee. He isn't like Michael or Jason. It's the unique charm that you can only see occasionally with some casting choices, like with Brad Dourif as Chucky or David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. Other people have played both roles, and you just can't capture that specific vibe of malice and glee they bring to the character. It's unique. Englund is Freddy. But they tried that with the remake with Jackie Earle Haley. And Haley is actually a really good Freddy. He's not as great as Englund, but he's this monstrous, evil force that genuinely, I think, captures that classic Freddy malice. The problem is, his face looks wrong. The entire redesign is off, and I get they want to be more realistic, like a real burn victim. But Freddy isn't a real burn victim. He's a dream demon. He's a spirit who chooses to take the most terrifying appearance to frighten people. He can change his appearance when he wants to, but he chooses to look the way he does because it's frightening. He's not there to be realistic, he's there to scare you. I also hate how the film turns Freddy from a child killer into a child... Well, he's a janitor who works at a pre-K, and Nancy, as we keep learning, was his favorite. A statement so scummy and disturbing, I don't want to think about it.
You're my number one. You're my little Nancy.
Ew! What the fuck?
Now, is the original Freddy Krueger also not that? Well, Craven wisely chose not to say. I think in his original drafts he planned on writing Freddy explicitly like that, but changed his mind. And as a result, Freddy became a character kids wore in their Halloween costumes. So, I don't know. I don't think that... I think that's a different movie. At a certain point, that doesn't need to be explicit, I think. Not for this franchise. It just feels too gross. But what makes it more bizarre is now Freddy's no longer a murderer. He's never killed anyone before becoming a dream spirit. So his actions feel kind of shocking. Like they don't feel like they make sense logically given the character so far, and given the cruelty he exhibits to these kids with his killing. But the bigger issue? The victims. Every teenager in this movie sucks. I think you can tell that Freddy Krueger films are only as interesting as his victims. The worse the teenagers are, the less interesting the film, because we don't want to see them survive. The tension is no longer there. And these characters in the remake are fucking morons. Because when these kids learn that their parents killed Freddy for assaulting all of them, the surviving teenager's reaction is to believe Freddy was unfairly killed and is taking revenge against the parents for killing the kids.
How do you know he was guilty? You killed an innocent man. We got him killed.
You can keep a secret.
Our stories, our lies.
I'll take you to a special place.
Innocent man.
In actuality, Freddy did do all those terrible things and is taking revenge against the kids for ratting him out. None of these people remember the abuse they went to. They're all isolated and not a single one of them remembers. They've all moved around the state and Freddy picks them off one by one. And it just feels underwhelming. It's a deeply uncomfortable thing, and none of them seem to have any memory of it. None of them talk about it outside of it being like the twist of a mystery. It feels weightless. This heavy, disturbing idea is weightless. The fact that this change was made to make Freddy more disturbing, and yet the film refuses to grapple with the disturbing implications, is deeply upsetting. And look, Rooney Mara is a good actress. But she plays Nancy as this lifeless person without any direction or drive, and I cannot help but imagine it's the director's fault. I don't think Mara is capable of this bad a performance on her own. There's just nothing to work with the script, and there's no direction with the actors. Because these are good actors in this movie. You have freaking Clancy Brown in this movie, and he's boring too. No one's interesting except for Haley. It's such a lazy nothing of a movie. Oh, and by the way, while the idea of micro-naps are interesting, They're boring in the film because Freddy is not vicious enough. He's not scary enough. There's only like flashes of him in like aisles and stuff. And it turns Freddy from being this dream master that's inevitable to basically an average killer who can kill you in a grocery store aisle, you know? It becomes less about descending entirely into Freddy's world and more Freddy slipping into our own for quick initial attacks. It's less interesting. So the Freddy Krueger franchise is one in decline currently. It is opposed to the competition, who undergoes cycles. Halloween's the best example of this. Since the beginning started, it goes through a regular cycle of revival and decline, rebooting every few years to keep the franchise eternally relevant. And while this results in a complicated timeline, to put it mildly, it also means the show goes on even when an ending should feel definitive. Others like Scream, Chucky, and Evil Dead just keep putting out entries that are, at worst, fun and good, and at best, excellent. And so it remains healthy due to a consistent quality of output that often is, again, in continuity with itself. Saw, I think, is the closest to Nightmare on Elm Street's story structure, with a cycle of ascent, decline, and attempts at a revival. I think with Saw 10, the series has gained enough goodwill to keep going, especially with the recent buyout. But Nightmare on Elm Street has the most in common, ironically, with Friday the 13th, another long-dead franchise, thanks to legal trouble. But Friday the 13th recently had its problems kind of sorted out, and we're going to get a lot of Jason really soon, from the Peacock series to more Angry Orchard promotions, I guess, and people are hyped about it. I'm reasonably confident the next Freddy Krueger project will revive interest in the series, as was the case with Halloween 2018. After all, the Rob Zombie movies killed all interest in Michael Myers, but 2018 revived it. But the problem is the passing of Wes Craven, and the refusal of the Craven estate to greenlight a future project.
It's my IP to sit on and do nothing with.
Though many have been pitched, even by England. We get a new Scream trilogy since Craven's passing, but not a new Nightmare film, and that's disappointing. It's a lot of missed opportunity left on the table. Added to that, New Line Studios, the house that Freddy built, was a little too distracted by the Conjuring franchise, as well as it, to ever greenlight another Nightmare film. Because these are new franchises, the shiny new thing. Not the old stuff, the new stuff. And they were hugely popular. I think also, speaking of it feels like the original It was proof we can do a Nightmare film in the modern era. In a lot of ways, that film is like Nightmare on Elm Street. Pennywise has a lot in common with Freddy Krueger, in that he personifies the fears of his victims. He's surrounded by kids who are at first separated and divided but come together to stop a monster. Though, that being said, Freddy won't wilt away if you bully him too hard. And recently, the Black Phone 2 turned the Grabber, the human villain from the first film, into kind of a Freddy Krueger 2.0. So there's a lot of room for Freddy in today's horror landscape. Add to that how flamboyant and over-the-top a lot of horror has become in recent years, it feels like the right time for a new Freddy movie. We've gone from the hyper-realistic and grim to hyper-colorful and exaggerated. We can bring him back in today's era. Look at Smile 2. Look at the colors in that film. And now imagine them in a dreamscape. Not to mention that the Black Phone and It both feature a key component of Freddy Krueger movies. The individual kids being picked off one by a monstrous villain, but only when they work together can they stop them. Or in the case of Black Phone, the spirits of the dead helping one kid stop their bad guy. It's simple, but it illustrates a theme I love in blockbuster horror. Community coming together to help one another. But why did Freddy fall? Looking at the pieces in their entirety, it becomes clear why Nightmare on Elm Street fell. It started off as a story with a very socially minded core conflict. The sins of the father are to be repaid upon the son. It's a story about an act of a community coming together to stop an evil the government simply can't stop. But then, when the chickens come back to roost, they ignore it. The fallout of their actions are neglected, and they do nothing about it as their children suffer the consequences. But then the next generation has to come together without any help, continuing a cycle of violence, the inevitability of Freddy returning to inflict more harm. And the story, I think, fell off the moment it left that theme. After the first half of Part 4, that core component disappears. Freddy keeps moving further and further from what made him so frightening in the first place, in those first 3 films. It's not just he's not a scary dream demon anymore, it's that the fear rooted in something tangible and concrete and meaningful is loss. The less anchored to a cultural fear Freddy becomes, the less real he feels. He becomes a showcase for effects. That's just fun to watch, rather than being scary or meaningful to the audience. New Nightmare and Freddy vs. Jason worked best because they at least remembered to anchor the monsters to something real. In New Nightmare, it became a reflection of how stories capture that zeitgeist, a societal fear of some kind. While Freddy vs. Jason captured the zeitgeist of government overreach in an era where, unknown to the filmmakers at the time, the government was about to really overreach, to enact some of its strictest overreach projects in their history in the name of stopping monsters. The remake, though, is such a confused mess with its messaging and ideas, and it proved inept because there's no grounding to it. Despite trying to be more grounded and real with actual terror, it does not want to explore. But the other side effect, the human characters, the further you deviate from the core of the established fears, the less anchored to reality it becomes, and the characters feel less meaningful. In the first two films, the teens feel like real people. In the third, they're still real people, but they're heightened. They're a little exaggerated because the core attention is put on Nancy and how she helps these new kids survive. And of course, the enhanced features can be used for kills. Come part 4, 5, and onward, each character becomes dominated by a certain feature that you know will end up being the thing Freddy exploits later on to kill them. And with the exception of New Nightmare, this continues on even into the revival era. As a result, you don't really care for these characters. They're expendable. They're tropes, not people. And that means you don't care what happens. So the end result is a cast of characters you don't really care about that Freddy will pick off. A Freddy that is less grounded in some real, tangible fear you might have going into the theater, leaving behind a singular protagonist. And in some cases, like Alice absorbing her friends, she's better off after all that, because she's better equipped to fight Freddy with their powers. And seeing the teenagers get killed off by Freddy is not something you should want to see. It should be upsetting, like in Halloween, when characters you grow to like are slain in front of you. That's the source of fear in the first three films, not wanting to see these kids get hurt. In the fourth, you kind of want to see them get killed, because that means Alice will be able to fight Freddy better. It feels at odds with itself, doesn't it? Like, yeah, you want to see these kids survive, but it's a good thing for Alice's fight that she has more equipment to beat Freddy with. There are many ways the franchise can continue, but not in the form we last saw. A lot of fans feel that Nightmare needs to be more serious, more frightening. It needs a return to form. And it can't just be like, oh, make Freddy scary again, because what does it even mean? It's not enough. It needs to be cemented in the core fears of the franchise, of parental neglect, of generational ignorance, of problems started before the characters are even born, but now they got to deal with it, of living in a world that does not move past trauma. And if you remember that, it can continue. And well. We've seen films discuss these ideas before already, but now we just gotta keep it going. If you want Freddy to return, you have to keep in mind what it means to be truly afraid.